Hey, welcome to our fourth video. This video will focus on startup costs and funding sources. How do you get the money to get your business going? It's important to understand what you are going to need to spend to get started. Most people who just go to work for a company don't understand the amount of capital or other financial resources needed to even open the doors on the first day. And so calculating your startup costs is going to help you estimate your profits. You're not going to be profitable day one because you're going to start fairly significantly in debt. And so by knowing how much debt you're going to have at the beginning, you can more accurately predict when you're going to start becoming profitable. Calculating startup costs should allow you to do a break-even analysis. Once again, this is the calculation that you can do to figure out when you are going to stop being in debt and start being able to make money. Knowing your startup costs will actually help you get that money needed to start up, because the people who you will be borrowing money from, whether they be banks, friends, family, or potential other partners, knowing your startup costs will show them that you know what you're doing in your business and are going to be prepared and primed to be successful. Securing startup costs can also, or calculating startup costs can also attract other investors, people who will become your partners rather than loaning you money and expecting to be paid back. Also, knowing your startup costs can save you money with tax deductions. There are certain things that go into starting a business that, because the government feels new businesses are valuable, they will allow you to take as tax deductions. And so by knowing that these costs are associated with the business rather than just my personal life, should allow you to make tax deductions and thus actually reduce the amount of money you're spending getting started. Depending on the type of business you're going to run, you may have different kinds of startup costs. For example, if you're a brick and mortar business, part of your startup costs will be finding a location for your business, paying rent, paying utilities. These are startup costs that, frankly, an online business may not necessarily have. If you're going to be an online business, some of your startup costs will be the building of your website, the securing of the programs and methodologies needed to process credit card transactions and things to that effect. Or if you're going to be a service business where you're not selling a product, if you were selling a product, you'd have startup costs with the manufacturing, etc. But if you're a service, you may have startup costs for buying equipment for your people. You may have startup costs with reimbursing people for mileage or per diem in food costs that they may have on behalf of your business. So the differences between these businesses are critical. What are some common startup expenses? What are things you should be thinking about regardless of the type of business you're going to have? Well, number one is office space. If you're going to have a business, your business will need a location to operate out of. Now, maybe at the beginning that's your home or your garage. And so those office space costs can be minimized in that way. But every business is going to need a mailing address. Every business is going to need some place that the business can operate from. And so if you're going to not be in your house or in your garage or in some place that you already own, then you're going to need to pay rent, and you're going to need to pay electrical utilities, and you're going to need to pay for the water. Maybe there's some licensing you're going to need if you're going to bring certain kinds of machinery on site. These are things you're going to need to be thinking about. What I will say, if you are going to be operating out of your home, in reference to the tax deductions I spoke about earlier, if you're going to be operating out of your home, you can take a percentage of the utilities, the electricity, the water, etc., that you normally would be paying out of pocket and apply them as business expenses and do tax deductions on them. Now, I'm no tax law expert, and so you probably want to ask Mary in your accounting section for more details of that. But generally speaking, office space expenses incurred even in the home space can be tax deductible. You're going to need some equipment and supplies. These can be as basic as staplers and 3-hole punches and pencils and pens, all the way up to really specialized manufacturing machinery. So it's important to understand you need to pay for those things up front and have them on hand when you start your business. You'll probably need to pay for some level of communications, whether that be email, whether that be phone numbers and phone lines. But your business is going to need to communicate with their suppliers, is going to need to communicate with their customers. And so having methods of communication become critical. You may want to have business cards, and so you may need to pay for those business cards. As I said, you're going to have to pay for utilities, whether that be electrical, water, etc., internet service. Once again, even if you don't have a standalone business, these are costs incurred by the business and need to be accounted for, but can result, once again, in tax deductions if you are operating out of your house. I've mentioned a couple times you may need some licenses and permits if you're going to sell food. Selling food is a regulated industry, and so you have to meet certain safety conditions and have a food license. Depending on what you're manufacturing, there may be some environmental challenges, and so you may need licenses and permits for that. If you're a service company and you're, say, going to be doing electrical work, your electricians need to be certified. It's amazing how frequently these licenses and permits are just kind of assumed by people when they see other people doing their business and aren't really investigated. So you should look into what does your business need to do based on what it's trying to do. Maybe you need a sales tax permit, that you're going to be selling things that sales tax will need to be charged for, and so you will need some sort of licensure or permit with the state to A, collect the sales tax, and then B, you'll be responsible for paying that back to the state. And you're probably going to need some insurance. And there are all kinds of insurance you might look into. If you're going to be a website, I would highly look into cyber security insurance, especially if you're going to be processing credit cards. If you're going to have workers going out into the street, you're probably going to need some liability insurance. Especially if they're going to be driving, you're going to need some liability and auto insurance for their vehicles, even if they're driving their own personal vehicles. Insurance is definitely something you will need to investigate and find out what levels of insurance are going to be needed specifically for your organization. Because if your organization gets sued, depending on how it is organized, whether it's a private partnership or a limited liability company or a corporation, you and your personal resources may be liable. Insurance can help mitigate some of that. You're going to need to carry some inventory. If you're going to be selling products, you will want to have products on the shelf to sell. And so making that inventory, storing that inventory, all becomes startup costs. You're going to need to pay people. Most people aren't going to want to work for free. And you will need to be able to pay them before you start making some profit. They're going to want to be paid starting day one, whether you sell anything or not. One of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs forget is they are an employee just as much as anyone else. Now, as the owner of the business, as the entrepreneur, sometimes they will forego a salary for a significant period of time, months, sometimes I've seen years. And so you may want to have some personal savings, realizing you may not get paid. But if you do need to get paid, and if you want to get paid from your business, you will need to account for your salary and make it realistic, just as you would with all the salaries of your other employees. You may want to pay for some advertising and marketing. It's not just enough to have a great business. People need to know you have a great business, need to know where to find you, need to know how to get to your product or service. And so you may need to do some investing. Now maybe you'll be doing minimal investing, and like I said, maybe that'll just be business cards. Or you're going to print flyers that you're going to put up in the neighborhood or at the local grocery store. Maybe it's going to be word of mouth. You're going to do a service for some people and they're going to tell some people. Maybe you're going to do some online advertising, and advertising via Facebook and Instagram is relatively inexpensive, but you should budget for that. You may pay to have some market research done. I know in this class we've had you Google some information, etc. Depending on how serious you are about your business, how complicated your market might be, you might want to hire some marketing professionals who can go in and do some in-depth market research to really identify who your customers are going to be and how likely they are to buy your product. As I said, you might need to print some marketing materials, whether they be flyers, posters, business cards, whatever the case may be, so you'll want to account for those. And if you're going to be an online company, and I would argue almost today every company needs at least a basic website, you'll need to pay for that website and pay for its hosting and pay for its development. These can be relatively minor costs. A simple domain name and a build your own website may only run you $20 a month, but that's still $240 you need to account for in your startup costs. Once you know what your startup costs are, once you know what those expenses are, now you need to actually put numbers to them. So yes, I know I need to pay rent. Well, how much rent? Yes, I know I need to have a website. Well, how much is that website going to cost? And you're going to need to do some research. Certain neighborhoods will cost more than other neighborhoods if you're going to be a brick and mortar store. Certain kinds of websites will cost you more. If you don't have the technical expertise, certain people to develop those websites will cost you more. It's not just enough to know what you're going to spend your money on, but you need to know how much you're actually going to spend. So how do you find out that information? Well, Google is a great place to start, but also talk to people who've done this before. Maybe you have a mentor who started his or her own business. Talk to them. Talk to the vendors that you expect to be buying your raw materials from. Talk to other service providers providing similar services. They don't have to necessarily be your competition, but people who are in businesses like yours. See what similar companies are paying in their expenses, especially if they're relatively new companies that have gone through the same entrepreneurial startup. And I think you'd be surprised at how freely people are willing to share that information with you. Even people who may be direct competitors may be willing to share some information simply because they recognize how hard it was and may have a respect for you as an entrepreneur. As you organize your expenses to think about them, you're going to want to organize them into two different categories. One is one-time costs. This is especially important in your organization because oftentimes these can be deducted for tax purposes, which will save you money on the amount of taxes you owe, thus reducing your overall business expenses. For example, if you need to buy a specialized machine to make the thing that you're going to make, let's say you're going to be 3D printing whatever your product is and you need to buy a 3D printer. Well, that 3D printer can be tax deductible potentially. Hiring a logo designer for your business can be tax deductible. Permits, licenses, and fees, these are generally considered one-time expenses, and so you may be able to take them out of your taxes. Then you have what we call recurring costs. These are costs that appear with regularity. Now maybe they recur once a year, once a quarter, once a month, but these are costs you're going to be paying over and over and over again. These are things like salaries, the lease on your website and domain name, utility bills, etc. So now that you have an idea of the things you need to be thinking about that will be expenses for your company, how do you get the money to pay for it? As I said, you're going to start in debt. You are going to start at less than $0. Where do you get that money that allows you, well, A, to be in debt, but also to pay for those expenses in those first few months? Every business needs money to operate. We cannot talk about business without talking about money. Those two things are by their nature joined. And since you don't have any sales yet, you need to figure out a way to pay those bills that you're going to have not only on day one, but on the days leading up to day one. There are three primary ways that you're going to get your startup funds. There are three primary ways that you're going to have a pool of money that you didn't earn to pay the bills that you're going to have. Number one is self-funding. You were diligent and you've been saving your personal funds, putting money aside every week, putting aside money away every month, until you have this pile of cash that you are going to use to run your business for a period of time. And you're going to just take out of that savings as you pay bills, pay employees, etc. I'll be honest, most of us aren't in a place where we can self-fund. I know I wouldn't be if I went out to start my own business. I would have to rely on other sources of funding. Now, also included in self-funding is working another job while you're working on your business. However, I think when you talk to most entrepreneurs, they'll tell you this is a challenge because as your business starts to improve, you are going to naturally want to pull away from the business that is paying you. And that can cause significant financial problems, and it can cause legal and ethical problems. For example, you wouldn't want to be taking calls for your business while you're working for this other place, etc. So self-funding is an option, and especially if you're doing something that has fairly low overhead and startup costs, maybe that's a way to go. But it is definitely not something most of us can do if our expenses are going to be fairly significant. Next, you can find investors. These are people who are going to become your partners. They are going to want part of the business in exchange for the money that they're going to put up. And so as the business becomes profitable, the value of their investment will grow. And at some point, either they're going to want you to start paying them dividends, paying them essentially small payments back, and this is above what they've already invested, or they're going to want you to buy them out at some point, paying them more for their part of the business than what they put in, right? Investors are expecting a return on their investment, and so be prepared that these investors are not just going to be people who give you money out of the goodness of their heart, pay me back when you can. They're going to be partners, and they may not only expect to be bought out at a certain point or expect dividends, they're probably going to be expecting a voice in decision making. And as owners, they have that right. So bringing on investors, while oftentimes a financially smart way to go, because you're not having to worry about paying people back right away, can sometimes crimp people's styles if they want control or if they have a vision for what their business is, and then investor isn't necessarily buying into that vision. And then finally, the most common way of starting up a business is to get loans. Banks and other people who will give you loans will want to be paid back pretty much from day one, and they're going to want interest, right? They're not just going to give you $10,000 and expect to get $10,000 back. They're going to expect interest, and so the money you're going to pay back is going to be more than the money you were lent. That's just the way it goes. Now, you may be able to get loans from your family. You may be able to get loans from people other than banks, and maybe they won't want as much interest, or maybe maybe if you're lucky, they won't want interest at all, but they will want to be paid back. And that's the difference between a loan and a gift. A loan is required to be paid back, most likely with interest, and in a specific time period. You can't just drag it out forever. As a result, these people who are wanting a loan, they are seeing it as an investment. They're getting interest back. They're going to want to know that you know what you're doing, and so that's why it's important to have those other documents put together, knowing your startup costs, having a business plan, etc. If you're going to self-fund, You can have savings that you can pull from. You can get from friends and family. These are gifts that they may give you, not necessarily loans, not expecting to be paid back. You potentially could pull from a 401k, IRA, or other retirement savings you may have. Maybe you've been working a while and your company has a 401k or some other individual retirement account that you've been putting money into. There may be an opportunity for you to pull from that, essentially borrow from yourself to fund your business. Generally, when you do that, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to have to be a loan to yourself, in which case the 401k or IRA holder is going to be expecting you to pay money back into your account just like it's a loan. Or what could happen if you're not planning on paying it back is there could be some fairly substantial tax penalties and some fairly substantial withdrawal penalties as well. Normally when you put money into a 401k or an IRA, it goes in there either initially with no tax, so it's pre-tax money, and then you pay tax on it when you retire, or you pay tax on it going in knowing that you're not going to be taxed on it when you retire. In either case, oftentimes because there is this tax advantage to you, when you withdraw money from one of those specialty accounts, the operator of that account who is investing it for you, allowing it to grow with interest, because they're no longer going to have that investment and because you're going to be changing your tax status, if you have deposited $10,000 into your 401k and you decide to take that money out to start a business, you're probably not getting $10,000 back. You're probably getting $8,000, $6,000. These penalties can be fairly substantial, almost to the point of halving what you have put in there depending on the tax rules you're working with. So if you're going to withdraw from your 401k or your IRA, make sure you consult a tax professional to make sure that it makes sense. It may not make sense depending on how you do it, and then there are definitely tax complications you're going to want to look into. However, regardless of the way you self-fund, it does allow you to maintain complete control of your business because it's all your money. All of the risk is yours, and so if the business folds, if you go bankrupt, the only person out of money is you, and so you maintain total control of your business. But the flip side is you have all the risk. And if you're sued, if you have to declare bankruptcy, especially if you haven't incorporated your business, it's not just the savings that you have built up that may become liable or may become exposed during that lawsuit or bankruptcy, but it may be your personal assets as well, your house, your car, other things that you own. So keep those things in mind. If you've got savings and you have fairly low startup costs and you can afford to lose that savings, self-funding may be a way to go. Otherwise, you may be putting yourself at fairly substantial risk. Always be careful not to spend more than you can afford, especially if you are self-funding. That bullet point is actually true in general. But oftentimes we get wrapped up in, oh boy, this would be a great location. Yeah, that rent in that location is more than I was planning on spending, but man, what a great office space, and I got great foot traffic and all sorts of things. Once you set yourself a budget, you need to stick to that budget. There's a reason you estimated certain costs at what they were. And so you may need to forego that great space. You may need to forego that killer employee who really could potentially, whether they be through sales or technical knowledge, really take your business off. If you can't afford them, you may put other things at risk by trying to invest in that employee or invest in that office space or invest in that piece of machinery. You need to seriously consider what all those risks are, because it could not only, as I said, end your company, but also put some of your personal assets at risk. Now, you can also get investors. These are people who will become partners in your business. This kind of investment is what we call venture capital. These are people who their business is investing in other businesses. So they will look very carefully at your business plan. They will look very carefully at how well organized you are, because they're going to give you some money realizing that they're not going to get a return on that. They're not going to get their money back for quite a while. Venture capital is normally offered in exchange for an ownership share and an active role in the company, meaning even though it's your company, you are suddenly no longer the boss. You no longer necessarily get final say. The investors are going to get final say, even if they're only putting in an amount of money that only gives them 30% control of your business or 20% control of your business. It is an investment for them, and they are wanting in the long term a return on that investment, a point where you buy them out, or a point where they can sell their stake in your business to someone else for more than they invested. And so they're going to want to make decisions. They're going to want to have an active role. And so that exchange of ownership share is one reason sometimes people don't ask for angel investors. The good news is most venture capital investors, while they want a share, have bought into your vision of the company. They realize you are bringing something to the table, whether it be an idea or a level of expertise that they would not otherwise have. And so while it's important to remember they're going to want a say and they're going to want some definite input into the direction of the company, they're probably not going to be an adversary for you within the company. They're probably going to be an ally. Now, that's not to say that there aren't venture capitalists who are out there just to make a dollar off other people's ideas. There are those. But I've worked with several venture capital firms in the past, and while they protect their investment, they make sure that there are people in the business who know what's going on, and allow the business to kind of run itself. Venture capitals tend to focus on high growth companies. In other words, if they're going to invest in your business and they're going to give you $10,000, and they think that's what the business takes to run, they're going to expect that business to grow very quickly into $100,000, $500,000, $1 million companies, right? These are companies that are going to grow a lot and quickly. Why? Because this is an investment for them. It's going to be short term, and they're going to want to get out of your business, whether you buy them out or they can sell their share to somebody else. They're going to want to get out in a certain period of time. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 7 years, but they will have a window that they are going to own your company, or at least a part of it. And then they're going to get out and they're going to want their money back. So they're focused on companies that are going to get to where they need to be very quickly. And as I said, they're investing their capital in return for equity, in turn for a piece of ownership, not debt. It's not a loan. You're not giving them cash back. You are giving them a piece of your business, which they can do with whatever they want. They can sell that piece of the business to someone that you don't necessarily like or want to work with, maybe even to one of your direct competitors. They are getting part of the business. They are not giving you a loan. But the good news is these venture capital firms are going to be willing to take higher risks in exchange for these potential higher returns. Since they're focusing on high growth companies, they know that the investments that they make aren't all going to pan out. They know that they're going to invest in 10 companies and maybe 8 or 9 of them are going to fail. But that one company that succeeds is going to succeed so well, it'll make up for the other losses that they invest in. Now, don't get me wrong. They're not going to invest in your company thinking it's going to fail. And they're not going to allow you to mismanage the company into failure. They just realize there are certain ideas that are good ideas, which may or may not pan out. And they're willing to join you in the risk that you are taking in starting your company, and take some of that risk on themselves. But if they think that you aren't doing what you signed up to do, if you have a business plan and aren't following that business plan, or if you are mismanaging the funds, they're going to step in and take over, and it will no longer be your business. And I guarantee you that will be written into the contract that they enter into with you. And they do this because they have a longer investment horizon than traditional financing. If you're going to take out a loan from the bank, they're going to want you to pay it back in a certain period of time. Venture capital investors realize that it may take longer than that 3 years, 5 years for that loan to pay off. So they may be in it for 7 years, 10 years, 15 years. And that's what allows them to take these bigger risks that maybe a bank giving you a loan would not be willing to take. How do you get venture capital? First of all, you have to find an investor. It can be an individual, which we call an angel investor, someone who has been successful, has money that they want to invest and wants to see something good done with it. And so maybe they're looking to invest in young people, maybe they're looking to invest in certain communities, or it can be a venture capital company. Regardless, each of these investors generally has a theory to their investment. As I said, maybe they're looking to invest just with young people starting their businesses. Maybe they're looking to invest just in communities of color or disenfranchised communities, or businesses that hire people with special needs. They're going to have a vision and a portfolio in which they're going to want to invest their money. Also, not all investors are the same. Check their reputation. Are they in venture capitalists who are very active in the management of your business? If you've got a lot of business experience and or you want to maintain all of the creative control, those might not be venture capitalists you want to work with. Maybe there are venture capitalists who have a reputation for selling their portion of the business to a larger competitor who's willing to pay more to get you out of the picture. Do some investigation, do Google searches, ask people in the community. Second, they're all going to want to see a business plan. Every single venture capitalist, regardless of their intentions, their portfolio, their vision, is going to need to see a business plan. As I said, they're going to want to be in a specific industry or a geographical area or a certain stage of your business development. And they're going to want to see that you have a plan and that you're going to know what you're going to do, because this is an investment for them. They want their money back. You're going to need to go through a due diligence review. Just showing them your business plan is probably not going to be enough for them. Just like you checked them out in investigating who your investor is going to be, they're going to check you out. They're going to ask to do a background check. They're going to ask to do an investigation of your finances, see your tax returns, talk to former employers and find out whether you're a hard worker or not. And then there's going to be a contract. There's going to be some sort of a legal document that you're going to sign and that they're going to sign that will set the terms of this relationship. So things that will be addressed in the contract is what percentage of ownership are the investors going to get? What is their exit horizon? How much control are they going to have over your business? Are there going to be incremental investments where they're going to say, look, in theory, we're going to give you $1 million, but we're only going to give you $400,000 for the first year, and you're going to have to meet certain benchmarks. And if you don't meet those, you're not getting the other $600,000, and we may need to exit the situation. Or maybe we're going to give you $400,000 for the first year, and if you don't meet your benchmarks, we now get controlling interest or controlling ownership in the business, and you don't get to decide anymore for the rest of the money. So make sure you're comfortable with whatever terms are in that agreement. You might want to get a lawyer. In fact, I would highly recommend getting a lawyer, because this will be, if it comes down to lawsuits, the deciding factor, what that contract says. Remember, this is an investment. These venture funds normally come in rounds, right? Like I said, maybe they agree to $1 million in theory, but you're only getting $400,000 in that first year. As your company meets milestones, then they may be willing to give you more money. Maybe they're willing to adjust the price of that money. Look, I'll give you more money, but I'm not asking for more of a control of your business. It is an investment they're looking for a return. It's probably going to come in waves or rounds. And so you need to be very diligent in how you manage that money all the way through. Companies do very well with angel investors, whether it's at the startup or maybe even later on in their business. Companies that are well run, that are well organized, that have a plan and that execute that plan can do very well with venture capital. But you must be organized, be diligent, be communicative with your investors before you're going to see success in this area. You can get other kinds of investors other than from venture capital. You can do crowdfunding, right? GoFundMe. Crowdfunding gathers money from a large group of people. Maybe you don't know people who have $1 million to loan you, but you know lots of people who can loan you 20 or who can invest 20. When you're doing crowdfunding, they're generally not partners, but it's also not a loan because they're not expecting to be paid back. It's a unique, frankly, fairly modern way of starting a business. What they often expect in return, rather than ownership or an interest payment, is some sort of a gift. So for example, you may have a band or an author or a filmmaker that you really enjoy their work, and they're looking to start a new venture. They're looking to start a new film, a new album, a new book. And they need some money to live on until the book is published, till the film is released, until the album is released, etc. And so basically what you're doing is you are giving them some money for them to pay for the film, be able to go write and do research, whatever. And so when the book is done, when the CD is done, when the film is done, either you're going to get a steep discount on a copy of that item, or you're going to get the item for free, not for free, in exchange for the investment you made, or maybe you get perks. Your name shows in the film credits, or you get to go backstage at a concert and meet the artist, or whatever the case may be. So when you're doing crowdfunding, this is another way to get some money, but be prepared, it's still not free. They're expecting something back. It's not a gift. It just may not have to be cash or ownership in your organization. The good news about crowdfunding is most people know going into this that it's a risk, that if the project fails, the band breaks up in the middle of recording the CD, the author dies before they finish writing the book, the film can't find a distributor. People giving in crowdfunding know they're just out of luck. I have given money in crowdfunding ventures. I gave money to a film that was being made about an author that I like, a biographical film. I was kind of expecting the film to be done and released a couple years ago. I got an email recently that said they're on the verge of finishing it, but I still haven't seen anything for my $20 or whatever I gave them. So if I don't get that money back, I don't get that money back. I had a friend who needed some medical care. I gave him the money. In this case, the crowdfunding was contingent upon him reaching a certain threshold of donations to have the medical care, and he didn't reach that threshold, so I got my money back. Crowdfunding is new. It's an interesting proposition, especially for businesses, and especially if you're going to be a small business, or especially if you're going to be a philanthropic business where you're doing things not necessarily to make money but for the betterment of the community. This might be a way to go. Finally, and the most common way businesses get started and get funds for the beginning are loans. They still allow you to maintain complete control of your business, but you still need some cash. You can go to the bank, to other organizations, and get a loan. To successfully get a loan, you're going to need a business plan, because a loan to them is an investment. They're expecting interest on it, and so they don't want you to go bankrupt so that they don't get paid back. So you're going to need a business plan. You're going to need an expense sheet. You're going to need to show them, these are the things that I'm going to spend this money that you're going to loan me on. Because they're going to want some say in what you spend your money on. Because in their mind, it's not your money, it's their money. You're going to need financial projections for 5 years. Them giving you a loan is contingent on you paying it back. And so you need to show them how your business is going to make money for the next 5 years, which is probably going to be the length of the loan, right? You're probably going to get a 5-year loan. So they want to see not only are you going to be making money, but you're going to be making enough money to continue to pay your expenses and pay back the loan. Where can you get a loan? You can get a loan from a bank. You can get a loan from a credit union. There are certain governmental entities that will give you loans. The Small Business Administration may not give you a loan directly, but they may be willing to subsidize your loan and back your loan if you and or your business fall into certain categories. So look for those Small Business Administration or SBA guaranteed loans. That puts less risk on you. Basically what happens is the government takes some of that risk, so that if you go bankrupt, the bank giving you the loan knows they're going to get paid back, not by you, but by the government. Now, Small Business Association loans require a certain level of responsibility and documentation, etc. But they do open up doors that aren't otherwise open. You, as a person, may not be seen as an appropriate or a valid credit risk to a bank or a credit union. But by having that government backing, knowing that they're going to get paid back, they may be more willing to make a loan for you. So that's our discussion of funding. Thanks for listening. It's really important. I encourage you to go back and listen to this again as you're going through your budgeting process. There is a budgeting worksheet, an expense worksheet out on Canvas that you will need to leverage as part of your business plan. And I encourage you to do that. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next video.